Have you ever bought a book and said, I'm really excited to read this book, this will be my next read, and then you proceed to not read the book, and then spend years with the book on your TBR and you never pick it up? And you are just, at one time you are just avoiding reading the book because it just has been sitting on your TBR for so long and you never pick it up? Because I definitely have quite a few books of that genre on my physical TBR, on my Kindle TBR, on my ever-growing list of books I want to read one day in my life. I have way too many books like that. So in today's video, we are going to be reading some of the books I have been avoiding to read. And if you're wondering if I'm going to read that one book that has technically been on my giant list of books I want to read one day in my life for the past 11 years, and then for the past year it has been on my Kindle TBR, and for some reason I keep not reading it. No, we are not reading that book on this specific video because I have other plans for Ready Player One, but we are going to be reading a few other books that has been on my TBR for quite some time, or I have been wanting to read for quite some time and I never get to it. The first one will be Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I put this book on my list of books I want to read one day in my life many years ago, proceeded to never buy the book, and then earlier this year I saw this book was on sale. The Kindle version of the book was on sale. It was one of those 99p deals from Amazon, which in my case they are not 99p, 99 cents. At least the price is not 99 cents, but it is also way cheaper than it usually is, and I got Project Hail Mary. This book has been sitting on my Kindle TBR for months, and every time I look at it, when I'm scrolling through my Kindle library, I'm like, I want to read that book because I just see great things about this book. I just see people talking and writing and reviewing and saying such amazing things about this book and loving it. I hope I will really enjoy this book. It seems like a book like I will really enjoy, and as of the time I'm filming this clip, I'm not sure if it will already be released because I'm not aware of the release date for the movie yet, because I heard you will get a spoiler if you watch the trailer, so I have been completely avoiding trailers or release dates so I can avoid any spoilers, because in this particular book I want to avoid spoilers. But I know there is a movie that will be coming out or might be already out that is starring the Ken himself. It is starring Ryan Gosling, and it is based off. It is inspired by the book Project Hail Mary. Like, I need to read the book before the movie comes out, or before I watch the movie. And so we are going to be reading, the first book we are going to be reading in this video is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. As far as I'm aware, this book follows an astronaut or a scientist, and one day he wakes up in this spaceship in the middle of space, but he doesn't know what he's doing there, he doesn't know where he is, he doesn't even remember his own name. So we will follow, as a reader, his journey figuring out what is going on. And now it's at this moment that I need to admit that I'm actually already started reading this book. I started reading a couple of days ago, and I'm currently 24% through reading the book, and I'm loving it. The character, he's surprisingly funny and charismatic, and I really enjoy being in his head, and this book is pulling in my heartstrings. It's a very emotional book, and so far I'm really loving Project Hail Mary. It's giving 5 stars feels. It needs to do a complete 180, something crazy, not positive crazy thing needs to happen for me to stop enjoying this book, and I'm only 25% to read the book. So let's continue reading Project Hail Mary because so far it's living up to hype. I'm loving it, and I want to go back to reading this book. Hello, so I finished reading Project Hail Mary, and I knew this book was one of the most popular books on my TBR. It was one of the most highly rated books on my TBR, and a lot of people absolutely love this book, but I wasn't expecting to like this book so much. So I love the characters, I love the friendship, I love the story. It was very emotional. It made me feel so many things reading this book. I was hopeful, I was sad, I was like so many things. I just absolutely loved this book. Also, this book was surprisingly funny because the characters themselves, they are so funny in their dialogue and the things they say and the things they do. They're just so funny that makes the book even more amazing, in my opinion. And the story also in itself, it was just really well crafted, the writing style, and in general, I could ramble on and continue talking. If you watch one of my videos before, you know, when I really love a book and you let me talk about it, I can spend 20 minutes saying how much I love this book. But Project Hail Mary, it's one of my favorite books that I read so far this year. Just, I knew it was popular and a lot of people loved it. I wasn't expecting to also love it so much. Also, I'm going to say, now that I read the book, I'm even more excited to watch the movie because the fact that Ryan Gosling is the main character in the movie, he's playing the main character, this is perfect casting because quite literally, the main character in Project Hail Mary is Ken with a brain. Reading the book, they don't really mention the physical appearance of the character, but reading that book, all I can think about is Ryan Gosling. All I can picture is Ryan Gosling because the main character in the book, he just felt he had a very strong Ryan Gosling vibe, very strong Ken with a brain vibes. If you haven't read Project Hail Mary yet, and if it is on your TBR, please pick it up soon. You are probably going to love it. This book definitely deserves the hype. If you don't have Project Hail Mary on your TBR, please add it to your TBR. If you are curious about Project Hail Mary but you are kind of scared of reading it because it is sci-fi, please don't be scared. This is a very accessible sci-fi. It isn't that hard to understand. It actually isn't hard to understand at all. And it's just that book that even though it is sci-fi, I think it's a kind of book that even people that don't like sci-fi will like it just because it's more than about this journey and it's more than about some scientific concept. It is very much, I would argue, mainly a book about friendship and community, and just such a wonderful book, a surprisingly wonderful book. For the second book I decided to pick up for this video, I wanted something that also just I thought would be a great book, a book I was going to really enjoy it. And I'm going to be honest, looking at my TBR, I was kind of trying to look what kind of book I have been avoiding that I might want to read right now. And I recently put every single book on my TBR, both my physical TBR, my Kindle TBR, my Kindle Unlimited TBR. I put it all on a spreadsheet because I'm trying to get back to being the type A me that I actually am, and I'm going back to one of my best friends, which is the spreadsheet, which gives us a lot of data. And essentially, I have so many books that I kind of been avoiding that have been on my TBR for more than 1 year that this video is essentially a mood reading vlog because I can read almost anything that I want because whatever I'm the vibe of, there is a chance I have it on my TBR, and it has been on my TBR for quite some time. But for the second book in this video, I was between reading a romance, something different from Project Hail Mary, just because again, I just loved that book. I just loved that book so much that I was scared if I went and started reading another book that was kind of similar, I wasn't going to enjoy it as much, so I wanted to pivot, do something different. But then I saw this book on my TBR that has been sitting on my TBR for around 2 years. I got it shortly after it was released. I've been wanting to read for quite some time. It has been on one of my recent monthly TBRs, and I think it's about time I picked it up. I was kind of scared because in some ways it's not as different from Project Hail Mary in the sense that it is supposed to be comedic, it's supposed to be funny, and also it is also technically speculative fiction, even though it is not sci-fi. It is a fantasy, and I decided to pick it up. Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Maher, and I believe this book is supposed to be a satirical take on romance, and it's supposed to be a funny, no, satirical take on romance. Why do I, every time I talk about the book, first thing I say is romance. No, I think it's supposed to be a satirical take on romantasy, and it's just supposed to be a funny romantasy. And in this book we follow Evie, who is a young woman who one day she finds herself getting a job to become the assistant to the local villain, and she kind of has a crush on the villain, and I believe the villain has a crush on her. And this book, so far I'm on chapter 6, and I'm really enjoying it as well. It's just a funny, nonsensical book, which I'm finding more and more this is my kind of book. I do tend to read a little bit of everything, but there are some sort of books that it's just very Miko, it's just very Carol, and funny books that are not very serious seems to be one of them, and Assistant to Villain is exactly that. So far I'm on chapter 6 and I'm really enjoying it. I want to binge read it. I started reading it a few days ago, and then I read a little bit more yesterday, but I only managed to read one chapter yesterday. But today I want to binge read it because this book's getting good. It has already mentioned quite dark things that our cards just like, I don't care. Okay, it's there. It talks about how she gets in the villain's castle, her workplace, and wow, there are 3 different heads hanging from the ceiling. So this means the villain is in a bad mood. But okay, as long as there isn't an eye on the ground, I'm fine. Because she draws her line at eye, because apparently when she steps on an eye, it's squishy and it explodes and it grows, and otherwise she doesn't care that there is 3 heads on the ceiling. She doesn't care that one day she arrived at her office and the villain just left a dead body on her desk, and then when she asked about it, he just picked up the body and threw it out the window. She doesn't really care about the dragon that might be murderous, and in general how the villain is kind of murderous. She talks about how she saves many lives just by giving the villain breakfast because he gets hungry, and she otherwise, like, the villain, he just doesn't think that like he's a villain, and she just doesn't care. She's like, okay, he murders someone, maybe I shouldn't have a crush on a murder, but he's hot, and you know, he's not that bad, he respects me. And so far I'm having just so much fun, and this is definitely a great book for binge reading it, and I'm in the mood to binge read this book because so far I'm loving this book. And I'm even more curious because so far in the book all the previous 5 chapters was from Evie's POV, and chapter 6, the one that I just stopped at, is from the villain's POV. So I want to read the villain's POV. I want to see if my suspicions that he has a minor crush on Evie is true. And in general, this book so far, it's so delightful. It's just so funny, and it doesn't take itself seriously. It's just such a fun book. The other thing that I want to say is that I think there's going to be a very specific twist, and I'm already predicting the twist in this book, but I'm not going to tell you in case it's true. But the villain, he has a thing about fighting with the king, and I already have an idea of what the plot twist about the villain and the king might be, but I'm not going to tell you because that would be spoilers, and while I don't care for spoilers, I know a lot of people, and probably you don't like spoilers. But I grew up in a culture where we watched soap operas, and you would get, as a child in the 2000s, and with a grandma that loves soap operas, she would get those magazines where you would open and you do have a detailed description of everything that would happen in the next chapters, and essentially it was spoiler fest, and I love those magazines. And to this day, we no longer get those magazines, but you go on the website and you get a detailed description of everything that will happen in the next episodes of the soap opera, and it's basically spoiler fest, and I love that. So I don't care about spoilers. Spoilers for me, I don't care. They are there. Sometimes it makes it even more fun because I find it more interesting to figure out how we will get from point A to point B rather than knowing what the point B that we're getting at is. But I know not everyone is like that, so I'm not going to tell you my theories about the villain and the king, but I want to continue reading the book. It's just so fun. I want to see how this romance will develop, because I believe I hope there is a romance developing between the villain and the Evie, because it would be so interesting, and these characters, they're just so fun. And if you're wondering why I'm calling the villain, it's because he's, as far as I'm aware, literally called Villain. Everyone just calls him the villain. Let's continue reading Assistant to the Villain, and I'll come back when I have any update for you. A quick update while reading this book is that the villain is actually not called Villain. He has a real name, which is Tristan Arthur Maverick. I'm shocked that the villain is not called Villain. Fully was expecting for his government name to be like Villain, or like Villainous, or something like that, but interesting. Let's continue reading, because we already had a development that I find it really interesting, and I'm curious about where this will go, and also the way he's talking about Evie and he feels about Evie, because he's saying like, oh, she's singing and this is supposed to annoy me, but for some reason it doesn't annoy me. So let's continue reading, because this book so far is a blast. Hi, so I finished reading Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer, and I love this book. I absolutely love this book. I actually picked it up to read it yesterday, and I binge read the whole thing to the point where I forgot I was human and I needed to do things like eat or sleep. I finished reading today because I read the last few chapters today, because yesterday it reached a point where I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore, but I also didn't want to go to sleep because I wanted to finish reading this book because I was loving it just so much. But then my eyes couldn't keep open, so I needed to put it down, and I finished reading it today. And I also spent way too much time looking at fan art about this book because I loved it. I loved the characters, the side characters. I love that they are all kind of black and white. I love the plot twist. I love that this is a comedic fantasy, but sometimes it gets quite dark, because the main love interest is literally the villain. I love the yearning. Oh my god, the yearning. There is yearning from both sides of this story. The female main character, the male main character, Evie, and the villain, there's so much yearning between them. And then we have also the side characters. There's also yearning between the side characters. There's yearning between magical creatures. The yearning was just phenomenal, and I'm trying to be concise, but I can't. I just love this book. I absolutely love this book. I love everything about this book. I love the little frog, which in English I think his name is Kingsley. I read the Portuguese translation. They translated his name to Reinaldo because this wordplay works better in Portuguese. I want to know more about Kingsley, the frog. I want to know more about the villain. I did a prediction in the previous clip about the plot twist. I got it partially right, but like honestly, all I want to do right now is read the sequel to this book, but I don't own it, so I need to go and try to get it, because all I want to do right now is read the sequel to this book, because I absolutely loved it. Have I already said it? Did I say it enough? I love this book. It's one of my new favorites. That's Assistant to the Villain. If you are looking for a good slow burn fantasy with a romance, this is a good one, because it's such a slow burn, and the slow burn is so amazing. If you like slow burn romance in general, you might like this book as well, because the slow burn, amazing. The yearning, oh my god, the yearning. Have I already talked about the yearning? Well, let me stop rambling about this book, because I could sit here and speak for 30 minutes about how much I love this book. So let's move on. Let's move on to another book. So for the next book in this video, I was in a crossroads, because I loved Assistant to the Villain so much that I was worried I was going to go on a bookish hangover. I didn't know what I want to read, because I don't want to read anything that it is like contemporary romance, because I feel like that would be overshadowed by Assistant to the Villain, and I wouldn't be able to read it. I wouldn't be able to enjoy it as much. I don't want to read anything too dark, because the past two books that I read, they deal with some darker topics. I don't want to read a fantasy, because Again, I just read Season of the Villain. I loved it so much. I don't want it to be overshadowed by this book. And also, I'm not in the mood for thrillers, which is some of the oldest books on my TBR are thrillers, classics, and sci-fi, and I'm not in the mood to read any of them. Like, I'm not in the mood to read Madame Bovary, which I believe is one of the oldest books on my TBR. I think it's been on my TBR since 2018 or 2019. But there was this one book that I just kept gravitating towards it, and I feel like it's different enough that I might enjoy it. So I decided to pick up Persuasion by Jane Austen. I believe this is a second chance romance, and I think it's about a girl, if I remember correctly. I think it's a woman that she's part of this wealthy family that suddenly it's not wealthy, and the guy that she liked is not wealthy, and I don't know. I think it's a second chance romance. I don't know much about Persuasion. I'm going to it almost blindly. I don't know how the cover will tie in with the story, because honestly, I don't like this cover. Initially I got a different edition of this book, but then they delivered this edition to me and I just didn't want to go and return it. Again, we're going to start Persuasion. I feel like might be a good book to follow up with on a Season of the Villain. It's different enough, and I love Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Is one of my favorite books ever, so I hope I also like Persuasion. Hi, hello. So it's been actually a few weeks. I did finish reading Persuasion, but I was looking through the footage and turns out I forgot to film the final review for Persuasion by Jane Austen, but I did finish reading it a few weeks ago. And in Persuasion, we follow Anne Elliot. She's the middle child of this aristocratic family. I believe her father is a baron, and her family, they're very arrogant and they're not necessarily the nicest. I found them to be quite insufferable, but the whole story is that Anne Elliot, who is the middle child, she's quite different from the rest of her family. When she was around 17, she met this young man around her age called Frederick Wentworth. They fell in love, they got engaged, but her family wasn't really that much of a fan of him. Her father didn't like him. There is this very important woman in her life who used to be the best friend from her late mother. She also didn't like him, but the main reason why they didn't like him, it's just that he didn't have a nobility title, and also he wasn't necessarily rich. Now, around 10 years later, Anne's family, they are not in the best financial position because her father again is quite arrogant and he likes to live above his means. He likes to live a certain way and he can no longer afford it. And in order to pay off his debt, they decide to rent their country home and they go to live in Bath. And she ends up kind of staying behind because one of her youngest sister, lives in their neighborhood. She isn't feeling very well, and she decides to spend a few months with her family, not her family, and she decides to spend a few months with her sister. And turns out that the people renting out her family home in the English countryside is Captain Wentworth's, her late lover's sister, and her husband. And because they are now around the neighborhood, Anne ends up meeting up with Captain Wentworth, with her former lover again, and they end up reconnecting. At first, it's kind of awkward because Captain Wentworth, he isn't her biggest fan because in his mind, she's the woman who broke his heart. She's the woman who, at the moment he was engaged, they were in love and they were engaged and they were super happy. And the next, she was leaving him. But things are different now because Anne's family isn't in the best financial position and is 27 and she's not married yet, which at the time wasn't the greatest. It wasn't women her age used to be married during that time, and Captain Wentworth, he ended up going to work with the Navy, with the English Navy, the British Navy, and he made a lot of money and he has all the prestige that comes with his position in the Navy. And Anne and Captain Wentworth and her former lover, they reconnect, and this is a romance novel because Jane Austen is the classic romance novel writer, so you can kind of find out what happens. This is essentially a second chance romance. And I went into this book with very high hopes because Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen is one of my favorite books ever. I just love that story. I read it multiple times already. So I went into this book with high hopes, and during the first few chapters I was quite disappointed with it because I didn't love it. I didn't love the beginning of this book. I thought it was quite slow, and again the side characters, they were just insufferable. But then there was a point where things just switched and I was hooked. I couldn't put the book down. I was reading it whenever I had time, whenever I had a chance, and I ended up binge reading the rest of the book. So overall, I really liked Persuasion, in part because I do really like Jane Austen's writing style and her storytelling, and I like her characters. So I didn't end up really enjoying Persuasion. The beginning was kind of weird for me. It wasn't my favorite, but the overall experience of reading this book was really pleasant for me. This is Persuasion. If you're looking for a classic second chance low burn romance with zero spice, maybe this is a cool choice for you. It's also a classic novel, so there is plenty of versions of editions of this book in multiple different price points. There is probably a copy of this book in your local library, so this is a very accessible book. And even though it is a classic novel, Jane Austen, I find she's not very hard to read. It's a very accessible classic to read, and also it probably has been translated in multiple different languages. So if you don't want to read in English, you probably can. So yes, this is it for Persuasion. This is actually it for this video. So if you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel if you want more bookish videos. Also, I believe this will be one of the first books I will publish in 2026. So Happy New Year! I hope you had a lovely end of 2025, and I hope you have a great 2026. And if there is any book you would like to see me reading, and if there is any video idea you'd love to see me explore this year, please let me know in the comment section. And I hope to see you with another video very, very soon. Bye!